"Everyone, I'd like you to meet Natalie," my mother-in-law said, standing up from the head of my dining table with her champagne glass raised. "She's a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai. She adores children, and I think she'd make a wonderful addition to this family." She said this while I was refilling the gravy boat, in my kitchen, at my Thanksgiving dinner, with my husband sitting 3 chairs away, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. The woman named Natalie, a brunette in a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my electric bill, had the decency to look mortified. She stood near the doorway, clutching a bottle of wine like a life preserver, clearly not expecting to walk into whatever this was. "How lovely," I said, setting the gravy boat on the table, with a smile I'd perfected over 9 years of marriage. "Natalie, please sit down. There's plenty of food. I always make extra because my mother-in-law has a habit of inviting surprises. My name is Claire. I'm 36. I'm a forensic accountant, which is a fancy way of saying I find money people try to hide. The irony of my career choice wouldn't become apparent for another 45 minutes. But we'll get there." My husband, Derek, coughed into his napkin. He'd been coughing a lot lately. Allergic to confrontation, I suppose. We'd been married 9 years, dated for 3 before that, and in all that time, he'd never once stood between me and his mother, Judith. Not when she told our wedding planner to swap my chosen lilies for roses because Claire doesn't know what looks elegant. Not when she rearranged the furniture in our house the week we moved in. Not when she started her campaign for grandchildren approximately 7 minutes after we returned from our honeymoon. Natalie was just telling me at the charity luncheon about how much she wants a big family, Judith continued, settling back into her chair like she was hosting a daytime talk show. 4 children, minimum, isn't that right, dear? Natalie opened her mouth, closed it, and looked at me with an expression that said, "Please don't kill me. This woman told me your marriage was over." 4 kids, I repeated, spooning cranberry sauce onto my plate. "That's ambitious. Does she also know about the vasectomy?" The table went dead silent. Derek's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. His sister, Brooke, choked on her wine. His father, Richard, looked up from his plate for the first time all evening. "What vasectomy?" Judith's voice could have frozen the Potomac. "Oh," I said innocently. "Derek didn't mention it. He had it done last March. Went to Dr. Rosen in Bethesda. I drove him home afterward and made him soup. It was a Tuesday." Derek Michael Ashworth. Judith turned to her son. "Tell me she's lying." Derek put down his fork very carefully. "Mom, this isn't the time." "So it's true." Judith's hand flew to her chest. "You let this woman convince you to." "He convinced himself. Actually," I interrupted, buttering a roll with the kind of calm you develop after 9 years of practice. "I was on the fence about children. Derek was the one who said, and I'm paraphrasing, that he'd rather set himself on fire than raise a child who might turn out like I paused, glanced at Judith. "Well, I won't finish that sentence. It's Thanksgiving." "That's a lie," Derek said quickly. "Is it? Because I have the text messages. You're very expressive in writing, sweetheart. All those exclamation points." I should probably back up and explain how we got here. The house we were sitting in, a 4-bedroom, colonial in Alexandria, Virginia, was mine. Not ours. Mine. My grandfather built it in 1952. My mother grew up in it. When she passed 6 years ago, it came to me, along with a trust fund that Judith had been trying to sniff out the exact value of since the day Derek introduced us. The house was in my name. The deed was in my name. The property taxes I paid every quarter came from my account, not our joint one. Derek moved in after we married, and I never put him on the title. My attorney had advised against it, and for once, I'd listened to someone smarter than my heart. Derek worked at his family's wealth management firm, Ashworth and Associates. His title was Vice President of Client Relations, which mostly meant he took clients to golf outings and expensed lunches that would make your eyes water. His father, Richard, had built the company from nothing. Judith had built a social empire around it, and Derek had coasted on both achievements like a man who'd been born on third base and thought he'd hit a triple. I loved him once. Genuinely, he was charming in that prep school way, self-deprecating, quick with a compliment, the kind of man who'd bring you coffee in bed and remember which museum exhibitions you wanted to see. But 9 years of Judith's influence had hollowed him out. The charming boy became a compliant man, and the compliant man became a stranger who spent more and more evenings working late at the office. Now, back to Thanksgiving. Claire, I think we should discuss this privately, Derek said, his voice tight. Like you discussed Natalie privately? I gestured toward the poor woman, who was now trying to become one with the wallpaper. No, I think the dinner table is the perfect venue. Your mother certainly thinks so. I was simply introducing a friend, Judith said, straightening her pearls. The pearls, by the way, that she told everyone at last year's Christmas party were a gift from Richard, but which I happen to know were purchased on Derek's corporate credit card. I knew this because forensic accounting isn't just my job. It's my personality. A friend, I repeated, who happens to be single, wants 4 children, and was told by you that Derek and I are separated. Did I miss anything, Natalie? Natalie looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her. She said you were finalizing things, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I never would have come if I'd known. Don't apologize. You're not the villain here. I poured her a glass of wine. The cranberry sauce is homemade, by the way. I'd recommend it. Richard cleared his throat. He was a quiet man, my father-in-law. 68 years old, silver hair, the kind of face that belonged on a Senate campaign poster. He built his company by being the smartest person in every room but had spent his marriage being the most silent. I'd always respected him and always pitied him in equal measure. Judith, he said carefully. Perhaps we should. Don't you start, Judith snapped. Someone has to think about the future of this family. Claire's been married to our son for nearly a decade, and what do we have? No grandchildren. No social standing. She sits in that little office of hers counting other people's money while our name means nothing. Your name means plenty, I said, especially to the IRS. Another silence, this one thicker than the last. What's that supposed to mean? Brooke spoke up for the first time. Derek's sister was 32, twice divorced, and currently dating a man named Todd who sold timeshares in Ocean City. She'd always taken Judith's side because Judith funded her lifestyle. Nothing, I said sweetly. Just a little work humor. We forensic accountants are hilarious at parties. Derek was watching me now with an expression I hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of his mother. Of me. Good. Claire, he said slowly. What have you been doing? Eating dinner. Would you like more turkey? You know what I mean. I set down my napkin and looked at my husband. Really looked at him. The man I'd married had blue eyes that crinkled when he laughed. This man's eyes were bloodshot and darting. The man I'd married stood 6-1 with perfect posture. This man was hunched like he was trying to disappear. What I've been doing, Derek, is my job. And it turns out that when a forensic accountant starts looking at her own family's finances, the results are very interesting. We're not discussing this here, he said. No? Then let's discuss the apartment in DuPont Circle instead. His face went white. What apartment? Judith asked. The one Derek's been renting for the past 5 months. A charming little 1-bedroom, 1,200 square feet. Quite a step down from this house, but I suppose it serves its purpose. It's for work, Derek said immediately. Sometimes I need to stay in the city when meetings run late. Your office is in Tyson's Corner, Derek. That's 20 minutes from here. DuPont Circle is in the opposite direction. I tilted my head. But it is very close to that wine bar on 18th Street, the one where you had dinner on September 14th, October 3rd, October 21st, and November 2nd. Always a table for 2. Always paid in cash, except the one time you forgot and used the Amex. That's how I found it. You've been following me? His voice cracked. I'm a forensic accountant. I followed the money. The rest just sort of revealed itself. Judith was looking at Derek now, and for the first time that evening, her face showed something other than self-righteous confidence. She looked scared. Derek, she said carefully. What is she talking about? Nothing, Mom. It's not nothing, I said. But don't worry, Judith. The apartment isn't the interesting part. The interesting part is what I found when I started looking at Ashworth and Associates. Richard put down his fork. Claire. His voice was quiet, but every head at the table turned. What did you find, Richard? I think this might be a conversation for another time. There's pumpkin pie. What did you find? He repeated. I paused. This was the moment. I'd rehearsed it a dozen times in my head, standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 2 a.m., while Derek snored in our bed, I'd planned to do this through lawyers, through proper channels, with the cold professionalism my job demanded. But then Judith had brought Natalie to my Thanksgiving dinner. In my house. To my table. And something in me snapped. Not violently, but cleanly, like a bone breaking along a line that had been weakening for years. I found that your son has been siphoning client funds, I said. About $740,000 over the past 18 months, funneled through a shell company registered in Delaware. The company's name is Ridgepoint Capital, and it's registered to a P.O. box in Wilmington that Derek opened using his middle name and my social security number. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. That's insane, Derek said, but his voice had no weight to it. You're making this up. I have the records, Derek. I have the bank statements, the incorporation documents, the wire transfers. I have the email where you asked your college roommate, who is apparently a very mediocre attorney, how to set up an offshore account. He advised the Caymans. By the way, you went with the Bahamas. I'm not sure who made the worst choice. Richard, Judith started. She's clearly delusional. This is what happens when you let a woman. Judith. Richard's voice was ice. Be quiet. I'd never heard him speak to her that way. Neither had she, based on her expression. Derek, Richard said, turning to his son. Is this true? Dad, she's twisting everything. You know how she is. She sees conspiracies in spreadsheets. Is this true? Derek's mouth opened and closed. He looked at his mother for help. Then at Brooke, who was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Then at Natalie, who had quietly picked up her purse and was edging toward the hallway. Some of the transfers might look irregular, Derek finally said, but there's context. $740,000 of context? Richard's hand was shaking. Not from age, from anger. From our clients? From people who trusted us with their retirement funds. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you stole from your father's clients to fund an apartment where you take someone who isn't your wife for dinner every other week. And then your mother, who I can only assume doesn't know about any of this, decided tonight was the night to parade my replacement through my front door. Judith's face had gone from red to gray. She was doing the math. Slowly, but she was getting there. You told me Derek needed a fresh start, she said, almost to herself. You told me the marriage was beyond saving. It is beyond saving, Derek snapped. But not for the reasons you think. No, I agreed. It's beyond saving because you're a thief and a liar. Those are the reasons. Natalie was fully in the hallway now. Smart woman. She caught my eye and mouthed, I'm sorry, before reaching for her coat. Natalie, I called after her. Don't forget the wine. And I meant what I said about the cranberry sauce. Take a container. There's Tupperware in the cabinet by the fridge. She almost smiled. Almost. After the front door closed, the room fractured. Brooke started yelling at Derek. Judith started yelling at Richard. Derek stood up and knocked over his chair, which startled the dog, who knocked over the gravy boat I'd just refilled. And Richard, quiet Richard, the man who'd built a company with his bare hands and watched his family turn it into a circus, sat perfectly still and stared at his plate. I began clearing dishes. What are you doing? Brooke asked, incredulous. There's still pie, I said. And I'm not letting good pumpkin pie go to waste, because your brother turned out to be an embezzler. Claire, sit down, Derek said. We need to talk about this. We will. Through our lawyers. Mine already has copies of everything. She's been sitting on it for 3 weeks, waiting for me to give the word. I stacked plates methodically. I was going to wait until January. Give us one last holiday. But then your mother brought a date for you to my dinner, in my house, and I figured, why wait? Your house, Judith muttered. You always say that, because it's always true. This house has been in my family since Eisenhower was president. It's not marital property. My attorney confirmed it, the prenup confirmed it, and the deed confirms it. When this is over, Derek will be the one looking for an apartment. Although I suppose he already has one. Derek sat back down heavily. The fight had gone out of him. Whatever version of this confrontation he'd imagined, this wasn't it. He'd expected tears, maybe. Shouting. The kind of emotional scene he could dismiss as hysteria. Instead, he got a forensic accountant with receipts. Dad, he said quietly, I can explain the transfers. You can explain them to the board, Richard said. And to our compliance officer. And possibly to the SEC. He pushed back from the table and stood. For the first time, he looked old. Truly old. I built that company for 40 years. 40 years of doing things the right way. Richard, don't be dramatic, Judith started. I said, be quiet. He turned to me. Claire, how bad is it? I stopped stacking plates. I owed him honesty. If the clients don't press charges and the money is returned in full with interest, it's survivable. The firm's reputation takes a hit, but it's manageable. If it goes public before it's resolved, it's much worse. He nodded slowly. And you haven't reported it. Not yet. I wanted to give you the chance to handle it internally first. You built something real, Richard. I didn't want to be the one to burn it down. His eyes glistened. He blinked it away. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My attorney will be filing for divorce on Monday, and the financial disclosures will be thorough. If Derek tries to hide anything else, I will report it. All of it. Richard nodded again. Then he did something that surprised everyone at the table. He walked around to where I was standing, took the plates from my hands, and set them back on the counter. Leave the dishes, he said. Judith and Derek will clean up. It's your house, and you cooked every bite of this meal. You shouldn't have to clean up their mess too. I felt my throat tighten. In 9 years, that might have been the kindest thing anyone in the Ashworth family had ever said to me. Richard, you can't be serious, Judith sputtered. I have never been more serious in my life. He took off his blazer and hung it on the back of a chair. Derek, start with the gravy. It's on the floor. He turned back to me. Claire, I owe you an apology. Not just for tonight. For years of watching my wife treat you like an inconvenience and saying nothing. That ends now. Dad. Derek started. You don't get to speak right now. Richard's voice was the voice of a man who ran a company, not the muted husband who appeared at family dinners. You stole from my clients. You lied to your wife. And you couldn't even do your own dirty work. You let your mother bring another woman into this home. A home that isn't even yours. Derek stood there, the gravy-stained chair between him and his father, looking exactly like what he was. A 40-year-old man who had never been held accountable for a single thing in his life, suddenly facing all of it at once. I want everyone out of my house by 9 o'clock, I said. Claire, please. Derek tried. You can get your things this weekend. I'll have a list of what's yours and what's mine. Spoiler alert, most of it's mine. I folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. The bedroom set in the guest room is yours. The TV in the den is yours. The golf clubs, obviously yours. Everything else, including the Le Creuset Dutch oven, you tried to claim was a gift from your mother, is mine. I have the receipt. Brooke snorted despite herself. Even in disaster, the Dutch oven detail was funny. I'd bought it at Sur La Table 3 years ago with my own credit card, and Judith had been taking credit for it ever since. This is absurd, Judith said, standing and reaching for her coat. Derek, get your things. We're leaving. He'll leave when he's done cleaning the gravy off my floor, I said. You can't make him, Judith. I turned to face her directly. For 9 years, you've walked into this house like you own it. You've rearranged my furniture, criticized my cooking, belittled my career, and tonight you brought a woman here to replace me while I was making the dinner you ate. So, I'm going to say this once. You are a guest in my home. You have always been a guest in my home, and your invitation has just been permanently revoked. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Derek, she said. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? Derek was on his knees with a dish towel, wiping gravy off the hardwood floor. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. 9 years of spinelessness. And in the end, it was the only consistent thing about him. Richard walked to the front hall and returned with Judith's coat. He held it open for her with the practiced formality of a man who'd been performing this gesture for 4 decades. We're going home, Judith, and tomorrow, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about what you've been doing behind my back. I was trying to help our son. You were meddling in someone else's marriage. Again. And this time, it backfired spectacularly. He turned to me one last time. Claire, for what it's worth, that cranberry sauce was the best I've ever had. I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and surprised. Thank you, Richard. That actually means a lot. He paused at the door, Judith already stalking down the front steps toward their car. If you ever need anything, a reference, a contact, someone to confirm what kind of man my son should have been, call me. I will. He nodded once, formal and sad, and followed his wife into the dark. Brooke left next, muttering something about Todd waiting for her and this family being insane, which was rich coming from a woman on her third significant life implosion but not inaccurate. She hugged me on the way out, which surprised us both. You should have done this years ago, she whispered. I know. Then it was just me and Derek, kneeling on the kitchen floor with a gravy-stained towel, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Claire, I love you, he said. No, you don't. You love the life I built for you. There's a difference. I made mistakes. You committed federal crimes. There's a difference there too. He stood up slowly, dropping the towel in the sink. What happens now? You leave. You call a lawyer, not your mother's lawyer, a real one. You figure out how to repay $740,000 before your father's clients figure out it's missing. And you stay away from this house until my attorney says otherwise. Where am I supposed to go? You have an apartment in DuPont Circle. I hear it's charming. He flinched. He deserved to. I handed him his coat and his keys, the ones to his car, not the house. I'd already had the locks changed last Tuesday while he was at his client meeting. The locksmith was very efficient. She charged $160 and didn't ask questions. Derek stood on the front porch, coat in hand, looking back at me through the doorway of the house that had been in my family for 70 years. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy I'd fallen in love with at 24. The one who'd driven 3 hours in a snowstorm to bring me soup when I had the flu. The one who'd cried at our wedding and meant it. But that boy had made choices. Hundreds of small ones that led to this moment. And I'd made mine. Goodbye, Derek. I closed the door. The house was quiet. Beautifully, mercifully quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm. When the wind stops and you realize you're still standing. I walked back to the dining room, past the half-eaten turkey, and the scattered napkins, the wine glasses with lipstick marks, and the chair Derek had knocked over. My grandmother's chandelier hung above the mess, throwing warm light on the ruins of my last Thanksgiving as an Ashworth. I poured myself a glass of the Barolo I'd been saving. The good one, from the case I kept in the basement behind the Christmas decorations, where Derek would never think to look. I sat down at the head of my table, in my chair, in my house, and I drank. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Natalie. Your mother-in-law gave me your number weeks ago. I just wanted to say I'm horrified and I'm so sorry. Also, you were right about the cranberry sauce. I grabbed a container on my way out. I hope that's okay. I smiled. I actually, genuinely smiled. Keep the Tupperware, I typed back. Consider it a parting gift from the Ashworth family. Trust me, it's the best thing you'll ever get from them. She sent back a laughing emoji. Then, for what it's worth, you're the most composed person I've ever seen. I would have thrown the gravy. I thought about it. But it's homemade, and I refuse to waste good food on bad men. I set down my phone and leaned back in my chair. Through the dining room window, I could see the street, quiet and dark, the last of the autumn leaves catching the porch light. Somewhere out there, Derek was driving to his DuPont Circle apartment. Judith was sitting in Richard's car, rehearsing her defense, and Richard was gripping the steering wheel, adding up the damage his family had done to the only person at that table who'd actually deserved a seat at it. Monday morning, my lawyer would file. By Christmas, the divorce would be underway. By spring, the house would be mine alone again. Truly mine, without Derek's shoes by the door or his mother's opinions in every room. But tonight, the house was already mine. It had always been mine. And for the first time in 9 years, it felt like home. I raised my glass to the empty table. To my grandmother, who'd built this house. To my mother, who'd loved it. And to myself, for finally being brave enough to keep it. Happy Thanksgiving.